because we think people are declining us, we have a hard time declining their requests, right? Because we know about that sensitivity intuitively.
Welcome to Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations, with your host, executive leadership coach and CEO of the Granger Network, Kari Granger, and me, Paul Adams, CEO of Sound Financial Group. This is the first episode of our four-part series on new futures, how to say no.
Welcome back to the Leadership Impact. I'm Kari Granger, and today's episode, we start our new series on creating new possibilities, new futures. And Paul, you know how we're going to start this whole series on creating something new?
Doing the opposite of what most people would do?
Exactly! Saying no. So, it's just so crazy. Why would we start with no, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I want to say a couple things about that. When we talk about bringing forth a new future, creating a new vision, opening up new possibilities, the first thing that we start to think about is, well, let's declare that, right? So we got to look at declarations. Underneath it all, declarations are the things that bring forth a new future. They change the game. They give us a new playing field. And it's not the same thing as a description or even a goal or a objective or anything like that. So declarations are not for describing the world around us. They're for initiating something. However, declarations are also for completing things. They're also for resolving things. But declarations themselves act as kind of a line in the sand. How many of us declare something new on top of a whole lot of other things? We don't stop to say, we're not going to do this. We're actually declaring no so that we can declare a yes.
It makes me think about business owner I'm very close with. Great person. Everybody loves, we'll just say him for the sake of this example. Everybody loves him. I go to conferences that he's not even at, but there's people there that know who he is, and they will say something about it like, oh, by chance, do you know so-and-so? Really honored. And in large part because of how much he cares about people and how much he engages people. But the one thing that has happened is it's put him on a path to say yes to so much. And saying yes to so many things, in large part because he cares about the outcomes for the people in his life, has actually created a situation where, no kidding, there's actually a whole set of medical tests and a whole set of like super rigorous interviewing of doctors, et cetera, to start working on some health stuff that is all anchored back to him pushing his body too hard because of how often the yeses have occurred without creating space by saying no to anything he said yes to in the past.
Yeah, and that's one of the most common things that I see with the executives that I coach today is the incapacity, or maybe I should say the underdeveloped capacity to say no. If you can't decline, you can't accept. If you can't say no, you can't say yes. So as this guy has accumulated yeses, my guess is his yeses become less reliable. They become less powerful.
Indeed. And this is somebody that makes over $1 million a year. Like, there's no question that this person is effective in business. And it doesn't matter if he is or not, if his health is going to fail over it.
Yeah. And the impact on health is huge and is probably the most important thing, although many of us don't live that way, right? We don't live like the impact on health is the most important thing. And if you don't live that way, it's also important to know that the impact on your performance and the impact on what you can create is pretty enormous. So many people I'm working with today are so overwhelmed. Really, overwhelm is like the prevailing mood about everything they have to get done. And if I ask them, well, what can you say no to? It's like they don't even know how to say no. So what they've learned over time is they've learned how to say yes when they really wanted to say no.
And I've even watched people create new declarations, like where their identity is how busy they are. like there's some pride in it. And so it makes it even harder for them to simply declare a no, to say, I can't do that.
Yeah. And I think part of that is for us to actually get bought into no. Yeah. So even when I'm working with people like that, it's like, are you even bought into the idea of no? Do you see the impact of that weakened muscle? So let me say something about no. No is related to our dignity. When I choose no, there's a great freedom and a great dignity available. I learned this from Julio Olala. The first time he said, freedom and dignity are available when I choose no and I choose the consequences of no. When I choose no and I choose the consequences of no, I can't tell you, it's like I grow 3 feet. The power, the declaration, no. And sometimes we think, it's hard for us to say no because we have a hard time accepting no. So it's kind of both ends, right?
And I would say people are saying, to your point about accepting the consequences of no, I think what that builds is a rigor to even then accept the consequences of yes, because I know so many people that are saying yes without thinking through the full impact to their lives and all the things that they care about from having just said yes to that thing.
Yeah. So what's really going on underneath when you look back to the gentleman that you brought up earlier today? What's really at the root of him saying yes is likely, some need for belonging or need for affinity or something other than, yes, I would like to give my promise to you to do that thing.
Yes, I would agree. And this guy, he's got a servant's heart, wants to be able to bring value to people, wants to be able to impact somebody positively. And at least for the first many years of his career, there was either enough physical energy or enough, family willing to bend or enough other help that he could Herculean get it done. And I think lots of people go through that. And then they get to a certain level of success. And now the yeses people are asking for are far too consequential to muscle your way through.
Yeah, very good. It's so counterintuitive for us to think that saying yes so much can close off possibilities. It's so counterintuitive because we think no's close off possibilities and yeses open possibilities. But if you say yes everywhere, it closes off you're actually saying no to other things, right? So it actually does close off possibilities for you.
Yeah, it's like if I accept this, what is it I'm declining?
Yeah, without even realizing it. Another counterintuitive idea, right, is that no can open up possibilities. Now, directly speaking, no closes it down. I'm not going to do that. That closes down a possibility. But what it does is it opens up space so that I can intentionally create the next thing. In my company, we just launched recently, right, this year, we launched the Granger Network. So we had been Kari Granger LLC, and we launched the Granger Network. And we looked strategically, what is it that we really want to take on in our first year as the Granger Network? And one of the first things we looked at is what are we not going to do? What are we not going to do? And we declared, we have all these programs, all this content that, other coaches and consultants, in my business, content is king, right? So people want to license your stuff. I got a lot of people asking me to license my stuff. And just looking at, what would that take? And everything else going on, we declared we're not going to be doing that this year, which has opened us up to have a whole new focus. Well, what are we going to be doing?
And even the very person that you have to say no to, it's amazing how often that they're perfectly fine interacting with you based upon the terms of what you're willing to say yes to.
Yeah.
That somebody would come to you and say, hey, can we license this? And you say, well, no, we can't. But we are doing these 4 things, whatever they are. And somebody says, oh, I could absolutely contribute to number 3. And they jump in both feet.
Yeah. I want to give you another example on just what you said. So one of the things that we do at the Granger Network is we do cultural alignment post-merger acquisition. We do cultural alignment, and post-merger acquisition is something we've been doing more and more lately. So I'm getting ready to do this in a in an environment in which it's actually in a military environment in which you have, two different units that have been put together. And I'm ready to go and do their, cultural and strategic planning. And, 2 weeks beforehand, one of the cultures that merged, they said, oh, we can only attend one day of the session, not 2 days. And I'm sitting there trying to wrap my brain around, okay, now how do I do this? And I realized, underneath it all, I just said yes. By me simply trying to figure out how do I make this happen when they're only going to attend one. And the whole reason for doing this is the two cultures don't get along. So at the risk of losing the contract, I let the two leaders of the two cultures know. I said, no. I said, I will not be coming. I will not do this unless both parties are in fully. Now that's part of our methodology is we are so authentic and we're so come from service, even if it means losing the client, right? But that capacity to say no, first of all, gave me enormous grounding and power and integrity. And within a couple days, they came back and said, we will both be there 2 days. We're all in.
Dates didn't even have to move, did they?
Dates didn't even have to move.
Mm-hmm.
Dates didn't even have to move. They worked it out. And if you think about it, my saying no created a very powerful yes from them.
I went on a decline fest in my own life for a period of time. Like, what can I, starting the day with, like, I'm going to need to say no to somebody today to get that muscle built. And I remember just a subtle thing that made it so easy to start doing it. So I think about this for our listeners, that this may be of help is I looked at somebody and said, I really want to help you. I do. But I really need your help because I've got these things I'm caring for my business, these other super important things I'm doing for my family. And I don't know how to say no to you here, but I can't do what you're asking me to do. So I need your help in how I can say no to this. And it worked. Like, people came around to my side of the table because they, no offense to anybody else, but they're not thinking about my concerns when they make a request of me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
People barely have time to think about their own concerns. So simply saying, like, I need your help about how I can say no to you here so I can hold the most important role that I have inside the company doing these other things. You
know what I love about that? So many of us think that a no means they're declining us, not the request. Right? So we really personalize it. It feels like a threat. No is. So because we think people are declining us, we have a hard time declining their requests, right? Because we know about that sensitivity intuitively. So what I like about what you did is you said, you softened it a little bit to say, hey, in a way, in the background is, I like you. I appreciate you. I need to decline the request. And it's so weird for me to decline a request that I'm going to ask it in this way. Because I also don't recommend that if you've never tried it before, you just run around and shout no, like, no, I'm not going to do it, right? You're not going to get the performance result. But if you start to think, how can I say this in a way that has them get, I'm declining the request, right? Not the person.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the way that you said that, just to build that muscle over time.
To use the muscle metaphor, I think of it like doing pull-ups with the rubber band that helps assist you, and just simply being able to say to people saying, if I could say yes here, and it'll make it real easy for both of us, but I know what my life looks like right now, and I will fail, and we'll both feel bad, and you won't be fulfilled. What can I do where I get to say no to you on this, but we remain friends, or that we remain colleagues, or that I can help you get help somewhere else, but I cannot take this one?
Yeah. Now I'd like to turn this really quick to looking at how do we receive a no?
Ooh.
So, what are the different ways? Well, first of all, many people don't say no. I had a colleague who, she recently wrote a blog post on our blog. You can find it on our website, grangerNetwork.com, about this very topic, in which, how does she recover from cranky moods at work? And she saw she wasn't, she actually thought she was saying no, but she wasn't saying no.
Oh, that is the worst. Yeah. And I've seen me do it.
Right. And so she came to me one day, she's like, my no is not being honored. It's not being listened to. I go, oh, wow. Tell me when you've said no. And we looked, and there was only one time she actually said no, and that no was honored. The rest of the time, she said something other than no. So, what are the ways that we try to say no when we don't really want to say no?
I need to think about it.
Like,
I'll get back to you. I think of those.
Yep. Yep. Maybe I'll try my best.
Could I look into that?
I'm really busy. I'll look into that. Yep. That's good. God, I got a lot of stuff on my plate. I'm just not sure. It's going to be tight.
Oh, that's a great one. Like I think I could fit that in. If I'm the one asking, I just heard yes, and I'll hold you accountable to that on Tuesday.
I know. Well, I told you I wasn't going to be able to do it. I don't know that you really told me that.
Nope. I looked at your email and it said it would just be tight. So I made 7 other promises based on that.
Right. So, as a leader, we have to be really attuned to when we get a true yes and when we get a no, or when people are trying to say no. It's really difficult for people to say no. And, cultural influences are, really big in this category as well. Some cultures have an easier time than others saying no. And that's something that we have to be so attuned to. What are the ways? And I have a question for you, Paul.
Fire away.
This is a question all of our listeners can think of, right? So what are the ways people around you try to say no?
One that I've gotten is sometimes people say yes, and it'll be the yes that is, I understand what you just said, but it was not, I agree to do what we just talked about. Or by the way, it may be either one of those. But what's curious is when you say being able, and I don't know that I'm artful about it, but I'll say, well, I heard you say yes, but just curious, does that mean you just committed to doing that or that you understood what I said? And I don't love how that feels. There's a touch of friction there, but not nearly as much friction as a week later and the thing didn't get done.
Yeah, that's going to be in our next season, actually, when we talk about accountability. How do you deal with that friction around just promises being made or getting clarity in agreements, right? But not to go into that too far right now. People around me, they actually say yes. And I've taken to asking the second question. I say, now, does that really work for you? I'd like you to look in your calendar, take a look. Does it actually work for you right now to say yes? And inevitably, they'll say, well, maybe I'll push it out by a couple weeks or a couple months even. I go, thank you. Because I'd rather have a solid yes than, kind of a weak, I'd like to appease you, but I'm not really going to say no.
So I need to, as I always do, like this is a big thank you, but I'm going to do this one kind of mid episode here in the idea that what I've always done to try to trigger whether or not people can actually commit is they say, yes, I'll do that. And then I say, great, by when? And asking them to freely commit. I can't tell you how often. I'll never forget one particular example. There was an administrator in the company that I was senior VP for at the time. And I said to her, hey, I need to be able to do this thing. And she said, sure, no problem. I'll get that handled. And I said, by when? And she paused and she looked. I said, when does your calendar allow you to get that done? And she paused and she looked and she said, well, by next Tuesday, but I'm going to need you to sign 2 things. Now, wait a second. Just a second ago, you said, I'll get that handled. But when I paused with the by when, so she had to check in with herself about whether or not she could really say yes. Then there were 2 things she had right there at her desk that I needed to sign that otherwise it would have walked away. What I love about what you just did that I don't like about how I do it is it creates friction. Like, okay, by when? It's almost like an interrogation, but pausing and saying, I just wanted to check, does that really work for you? Mm-hmm. And when does it work for you to have it by? I'm now centering around what they care about. Whereas my by when question is I'm not a soft, cuddly person generally. So it shows up as like a touch aggressive even. Mm-hmm. And so I just love being able to come around their side of the table. Like, does this really work for you to do this in this timeline? Yeah.
Yeah. I used to be a by whenner and I had the same thing. Yeah, exactly the same thing. Now, the other thing is, just coming back to no again is, is this, I'll even ask sometimes, this is even more, right? I really want you to do something, Paul, but I know how important a no is because I'd much rather have a no than something hanging out, right? So I'll say, or is this something you'll need to say no to? And what I find on even my own team, and we teach this stuff. is just such this reluctance to declare, I'm not going to do it. And so, I almost coach the people around me to say no to me, which is so important, as a leader in an organization, that you have an environment in which no is a possibility. So you have to say no. And you might have to go over the top, like I'm kind of going over the top. Is this something you should say no to? Right? Just so that, man, we're powerful. When we say yes, it's powerful. When we say no, it's powerful. We have freedom to pick and choose what we're going to do in the future. We're not obligated. We're not tied up by it. And it allows for us to literally shape our future through our no's, we're complete, we're done with that. Just like, by the way, when you have a divorce, that is a declaration. I divorce you. That's like a no relationship. Or when you end an initiative. There's so much power in declaring these things complete, in declaring a no, because it does give you the freedom for what you're going to invent in the future, what you're going to invent next, what you're going to take on next, and what you're going to give your full attention, your full focus, just you to.
I think something I'm taking away from today's podcast is I'm going to be taking, during our next quarterly session we do with our team, and listing all the things and initiatives that we've talked about. And many of them we may not even be working on right now, but we created the possibility and we are not pursuing them, but nobody said that. And I can't imagine the amount of collective mental horsepower that's being eaten up by us not just having had a conversation about we are not going to do those things.
Yeah.
So that just another great big aha from today's session, Kari.
Awesome.
And Kari, just once again, you demonstrate how just being in a conversation like this one, reflecting on some new distinctions, reflecting on the idea that something as simple as no can create the room that we need to say yes to the things that are going the direction in life that we want them to go, or the direction in business that we want them to go. I've taken away, as people have heard, like two major things that are going to change the way I interact with others inside and outside of my organization. And what I want to encourage is everybody goes into their day today and finishes out their week is watch for the places where you get a chance to say no that creates the space to say yes to something, and experiment with helping others maybe not just give you the blind yes, but really check in with them so that they get the opportunity that their yes can be their yes and their no can be their no, because you've given them permission to do so. Thanks so much again, Kari.
You're welcome. And I love that we started our series on creation and possibility with no.
Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. Subscribe now at grangerNetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And to support you in your leadership impact, we've created an exclusive set of guiding questions on today's topic. Just text the word decline to 900-900 and you'll receive the link. If you like what you're hearing, you will love our online courses, which will transform your performance and leadership over 4 months with videos, practices, and group Q&As. These online courses are our approach to essential development for professionals. We also have a live workshop coming up next month on productivity and accomplishment to support you in setting yourself up powerfully for 2019. Find it all at GrangerNetwork.com and join us for our next episode on New Futures.